The Galactic Council chamber had witnessed the rise of civilizations that stretched across entire spiral arms. It had survived the collapse of stellar kingdoms, the extinction of ancient species older than most suns, and political betrayals that had rewritten the borders of the known galaxy. Its walls, carved from living crystal harvested from a dead neutron star, carried the echoes of 10,000 years of history. Every scar etched into the chamber represented a crisis that had once seemed impossible to overcome. Every seat surrounding the enormous circular hall belonged to a species powerful enough to shape the destiny of billions. Here, nothing surprised anyone anymore. At least, that was what every delegate believed, until the chamber doors exploded open. The sound shattered the sacred silence like a weapon. Every conversation stopped instantly. Hundreds of glowing eyes, mechanical lenses, sensory antennae, and crystalline faces turned toward the entrance. Armed sentinels reached for their plasma halberds, expecting assassins or perhaps another desperate delegation fleeing civil war. Instead, a single figure stumbled across the polished obsidian floor. He was barely recognizable. His once pristine diplomatic armor had been melted into twisted fragments, its ceremonial insignias burned away by unimaginable heat. Deep cracks spread across his breathing mask, forcing each breath to escape as a painful rasp. One arm hung uselessly at his side while the other struggled to support his collapsing body. Behind him stretched a trail of dark blue blood that reflected beneath the chamber lights like liquid sapphire. No one moved. The envoy belonged to the Tharkel Dominion, a military civilization feared across 7 sectors. Their soldiers were genetically engineered to endure conditions that would kill almost any other species. They did not panic. They did not retreat. And they certainly did not arrive looking defeated. Yet this one looked as though he had escaped the end of the universe itself. The towering chamber suddenly felt smaller. The council speaker slowly rose from the central platform, his ancient voice carrying effortlessly across the hall. "Envoy, report." For a long moment, the wounded messenger said nothing. His chest rose and fell violently as emergency stimulants fought to keep him conscious. His trembling hand reached toward the center of the chamber as though searching for balance in a reality that no longer made sense. His eyes. They were filled with something the galaxy had almost forgotten existed. Terror. Not fear of death. Fear of memory. Finally, with every remaining ounce of strength, he forced the words through shattered lungs. "Someone." His voice cracked. "Assaulted Earth." Silence answered him. Not confusion. Not disbelief. Silence. The words spread through the council chamber like invisible radiation, poisoning every thought they touched. Several younger delegates exchanged puzzled glances, unfamiliar with the significance of that distant blue world. To them, Earth was merely another developing member of the galactic community, a peaceful civilization known more for humanitarian aid than military displays. But the older representatives. Their expressions changed instantly. An elder from the Vesha collective slowly closed all 4 of his eyes. The ancient archivist of the Orinan Union lowered his head as though attending a funeral. Even the Supreme Marshal of the Iron Coalition, whose fleets had conquered dozens of civilizations without hesitation, suddenly gripped the edge of his podium so tightly that reinforced alloy bent beneath his fingers. No one asked who had attacked. Because that wasn't the important question. The real question settled over the chamber like a storm cloud too enormous to escape. Who had been foolish enough to attack humanity? And somewhere beyond the council's towering walls, beneath the quiet light of an ordinary blue star, history had already begun to rewrite itself. Far from the political storms raging inside the Galactic Council, Earth drifted peacefully around an ordinary yellow star, almost invisible against the vastness of the Orion Arm. To the great powers of the galaxy, it was an unremarkable world, a young civilization that had entered interstellar society only a few generations earlier. Their ships lacked the overwhelming size of imperial dreadnoughts. Their fleets rarely appeared in military parades. Their ambassadors spoke more often of cooperation than conquest. To outsiders, humanity seemed almost naive, investing unimaginable resources into hospitals that orbited dying suns, rescue stations hidden along dangerous hyperspace corridors, and engineering projects designed not to strengthen borders, but to save strangers. Many civilizations quietly mocked them for it. They called humans sentimental, soft. A species still clinging to primitive ideals in a galaxy where only strength survived. They couldn't have been more wrong. A sleek exploration vessel glided through the darkness between stars, its polished hull reflecting distant nebulae like rivers of liquid silver. Across its bow, illuminated in soft blue letters, was its name, the Aegis Dawn. Unlike the warships of the neighboring empires, its silhouette carried no intimidating weapons or oversized cannons. Instead, modular rescue bays lined its sides beside advanced medical facilities, atmospheric fabrication arrays, and autonomous repair drones capable of rebuilding entire settlements from scattered ruins. Every system aboard had been designed with one purpose: preserving life. Standing quietly on the bridge was Captain Elena Reyes. She watched the stars through the panoramic observation window without speaking, her hands resting behind her back as streams of navigation data floated across transparent holographic displays. Years of command had etched calm confidence into every movement she made. She had witnessed supernova evacuations, negotiated peace between species that had spent centuries at war, and led rescue operations inside collapsing black hole mining colonies. Yet despite everything she had experienced, she still paused whenever she looked at the stars. Because every point of light represented lives. Families. Dreams. Worlds worth protecting. Behind her, the bridge hummed with disciplined efficiency. Officers from half a dozen species worked side by side, sharing stations without hesitation. A reptilian engineer adjusted power distribution alongside a human technician. An insectoid communications officer translated distress frequencies from civilizations that had never even met each other. A synthetic intelligence quietly monitored millions of potential navigation hazards, speaking only when absolutely necessary. The Aegis Dawn was more than a ship. It was a promise. Its current mission had begun 3 weeks earlier after an unstable pulsar devastated a chain of independent colonies beyond officially charted space. While neighboring empires debated jurisdiction, trade rights, and military escorts, humanity simply responded. Food supplies. Medical teams. Terraforming equipment. Reconstruction drones. No speeches. No demands for payment. No political negotiations. Just help. As the vessel slipped through hyperspace, Elena studied the newest reports appearing across her display. Entire settlements had already regained breathable atmospheres. Power grids were coming back online. Thousands of civilians had survived because human rescue ships arrived before anyone else even approved the mission. She allowed herself the smallest smile. Sometimes doing the right thing was enough. Then every light on the bridge flickered. The calm electronic rhythm of the ship vanished beneath the sharp pulse of an emergency alarm. One by one, every holographic display turned crimson. The communications officer's voice broke the silence, strained in a way Elena had never heard before. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission." He hesitated. "It isn't a distress call." Another pause. "It's from Earth." The bridge fell completely silent. In the endless darkness beyond the observation window, the stars remained beautiful. But somehow, they no longer felt safe. The first explosions appeared in orbit before anyone on the surface understood they were under attack. Above humanity's frontier colony of New Horizon, the night sky transformed into a blazing ocean of fire as streaks of emerald plasma tore through the atmosphere. Massive orbital defense satellites, silent guardians that had watched over the colony for decades, vanished one after another in flashes so bright they briefly turned midnight into daylight. Children stopped pointing at the stars. Parents stopped speaking. Across crowded streets and towering arcology windows, millions looked upward as fragments of burning metal rained from the heavens like artificial meteors. There had been no declaration of war. No diplomatic warning. Only destruction delivered with terrifying precision. Within minutes, every emergency channel across human space erupted into chaos. This is Colony Command. We've lost orbital coverage. Medical sectors are overwhelmed. Unknown hostile fleet entering low orbit. Then the broadcasts began to disappear. One. After another. After another. Entire cities simply went silent. Deep inside the command bridge of the Aegis Dawn, Captain Elena Reyes stood motionless as incoming reports flooded every holographic display around her. Thousands of blinking lights marked settlements spread across dozens of systems. One by one, those lights shifted from calm blue to flashing red, before fading into cold gray. Communication lost. Status unknown. Every disappearing signal represented people she had sworn to protect. Families she had evacuated. Children she had met during relief missions. Faces she still remembered. Her chest tightened. For the first time in years, she found herself unable to speak. The tactical officer finally broke the silence. We've confirmed the attackers. A rotating hologram expanded above the central command table. The emblem of the Varkun Dominion slowly turned beneath the bridge lights, a black crown surrounded by crimson stars. No one needed an explanation. The Varkun were feared throughout known space, a civilization built entirely upon conquest. Their fleets measured victory by the number of worlds brought to heel. Their academies taught that compassion weakened empires. Every treaty they signed existed only until breaking it became profitable. But even they had crossed a line few civilizations dared approach. They had attacked Earth. Not just its colonies. Earth. Alarms echoed through every deck of the ship as encrypted military frequencies flooded the network. Fleet commands called for mobilization. Rescue divisions requested impossible deployment schedules. Civilian evacuation corridors collapsed beneath overwhelming traffic. Somewhere beyond the stars, millions were running without knowing where safety still existed. Elena expected panic. Instead, something stranger happened. The transmissions stopped. Not because communications had failed. Because someone had silenced them. Across the bridge, every officer stared as military networks disconnected one after another under direct authorization from Earth's strategic command. Entire fleets vanished from public tracking. Long-range scanners lost lock on carrier groups containing thousands of vessels. Classified shipyards disappeared behind encrypted quantum fields. Even allied governments reported the same impossible phenomenon. Human military assets were simply gone. Confusion spread faster than fear. Foreign intelligence agencies scanned every known sector. Nothing. Spy satellites searched hidden bases. Nothing. Trade convoys reported abandoned patrol routes. Nothing. It was as if humanity had erased its own armed forces from existence. Captain Reyes slowly understood what that meant. This wasn't a retreat. It wasn't surrender. It was preparation. Somewhere beyond every sensor, every telescope, and every intelligence network in the galaxy, humanity was moving in absolute silence. No speeches. No broadcasts. No threats. Only stillness. And veterans across dozens of alien governments felt something they hadn't experienced in centuries. Not confidence. Not anticipation. Dread. Because history had taught one brutal lesson that every surviving empire eventually learned. The loudest armies announced their arrival. The deadliest ones disappear, just before they strike. As panic spread across the known galaxy, another mystery unfolded in perfect silence. Deep beneath the Galactic Council archives, vaults so heavily protected that even senior ambassadors required unanimous authorization to enter. Ancient security protocols suddenly activated on their own. Layers of quantum encryption dissolved one after another, not through hacking, but through commands written thousands of years earlier. Massive crystalline data vaults, sealed since before many modern civilizations had discovered faster-than-light travel, awakened from centuries of dormancy. Their surfaces glowed with pale blue light, projecting streams of forgotten records into the darkness. Archivists stared in stunned disbelief. No one had requested access. No living official possessed the authority to unlock these files. Yet the system recognized a condition more important than permission. Earth was under attack. Across government networks, military command centers, and diplomatic embassies, classified documents began appearing simultaneously. Files labeled Omega Restricted. Historical records marked erase after final conflict. Entire centuries of galactic history, long dismissed as myth, returned without warning. Delegates watched holographic recordings materialize before them. Worlds burned beneath endless swarms of black machines. Suns disappeared behind clouds of artificial vessels stretching farther than scanners could measure. Civilizations that once ruled entire quadrants vanished within days, consumed by an enemy known only in fragmented legends as the Devouring Intelligence. Then the impossible revelation emerged. The first organized resistance had been humanity. Gasps echoed through every archive chamber as battle footage unfolded. Human warships, primitive by modern standards yet astonishingly resilient, hurled themselves into impossible battles against an enemy that outnumbered them 1,000 to 1. Entire fleets sacrificed themselves to delay machine invasions long enough for refugee worlds to escape. Planetary populations volunteered for evacuation knowing they would never return home. Factory worlds transformed into colossal shipyards operating without pause for generations. Humanity hadn't merely survived the greatest war in galactic history. They had ended it. But victory had come at a terrible cost. The final recording froze every observer in place. An Earth unlike any remembered in history appeared beneath smoke-filled skies. Oceans boiled from orbital bombardments. Continents glowed with radioactive fire. Billions had perished. Survivors walked through ruined cities carrying nothing except each other. A narrator's voice, calm despite unimaginable grief, filled every chamber. If these records are ever seen again, then we have failed. The recording shifted. Generations passed in moments. Human leaders dismantled planet-killing weapons. Entire fleets were decommissioned and buried beyond charted space. Military doctrines were rewritten, replacing conquest with rescue, expansion with cooperation. History itself was edited. Evidence vanished from public memory. Even humanity's own descendants gradually forgot the scale of the war their ancestors had fought. Not because they were ashamed of winning. Because they feared becoming comfortable with war. The peaceful civilization welcomed into the Galactic Council had never been weak. It had been deliberately restrained. Every smiling diplomat. Every humanitarian mission. Every rescue fleet crossing dangerous frontiers. They were choices. Not limitations. Inside the council chamber, silence became almost unbearable. The oldest delegates finally understood why ancient treaties contained strange clauses forbidding unprovoked aggression against Earth. They remembered stories dismissed as superstition, warnings whispered by civilizations long extinct, cautioning future generations never to mistake kindness for inability. Far beyond the Council's reach, Captain Elena Reyes stood on the bridge of the Aegis Dawn, watching encrypted orders scroll across her display. They were unlike anything she had seen in her entire career. Ancient authorization codes. Fleet designations absent from every modern registry. Coordinates leading far beyond known star maps. Her heartbeat slowed. Not from fear. From understanding. Humanity had spent centuries hoping these orders would never be needed again. But someone had forced open a chapter of history that had remained buried for thousands of years. The Varkun believed they had awakened an ordinary civilization. Instead, they had awakened the last veterans of a forgotten apocalypse. 72 hours after the Varkun Dominion celebrated what it believed was the beginning of humanity's collapse, the stars themselves seemed to change. Across occupied systems, long-range sensors flickered with impossible readings. Deep space observatories detected brief distortions in spacetime, tiny ripples that appeared and vanished before automated systems could classify them. Varkun admirals dismissed the anomalies as equipment failures. They had already shattered Earth's frontier defenses. Their victory, they believed, was inevitable. Yet aboard command bridges scattered across the Dominion, veteran officers felt an unease they could not explain. Space had grown too quiet. Trade routes were empty. Civilian broadcasts had gone silent. Even the desperate calls for surrender they expected from humanity never came. It was as if an entire civilization had inhaled, and refused to exhale. Then the darkness opened. Without warning, hundreds of brilliant rings of blue-white light blossomed behind the Varkun armadas. They did not erupt with explosive violence. They unfolded with terrifying precision, like perfectly synchronized doors opening across the fabric of space itself. One ring became 10. 10 became hundreds. Hundreds became thousands. Every strategic system reported the same impossible event at the exact same second. Human fleets emerged not in chaotic waves, but in flawless geometric formations that stretched farther than visual scanners could measure. Massive carriers, silent escort cruisers, medical support vessels, evacuation transports, electronic warfare platforms, and sleek interceptor wings appeared together as though they had always been there, hidden just beyond reality itself. Captain Elena Reyes stood aboard the Aegis Dawn, now sailing alongside vessels she had only heard about in classified Academy legends. Ancient fleet insignias glowed softly across their hulls, symbols erased from public history centuries ago. The bridge remained calm. No one shouted. No one celebrated. Every officer carried the same expression of quiet determination. They had not assembled to conquer. They had assembled because there was no longer any other choice. Orders spread across the fleet in measured, almost gentle voices. Prioritize civilian evacuation. Disable planetary shield generators. Target military command infrastructure only. Confirm hospitals and refugee shelters before weapons release. The contrast was almost surreal. The largest military operation in human history sounded like a rescue mission. As the fleet advanced, impossible technology revealed itself. Swarms of autonomous drones slipped through microscopic weaknesses in Varkun defense grids, shutting down orbital weapons without detonating them. Precision electromagnetic pulses silenced battleships while leaving life support systems untouched. Marine teams breached command stations using non-lethal suppression fields whenever surrender remained possible. Entire occupied cities watched in disbelief as human engineers restored damaged power grids even while battles raged in orbit above them. The Varkun fought with desperation. They launched wave after wave of attack craft. Missile storms illuminated the darkness. Heavy plasma cannons carved rivers of fire through space. But every assault met an answer that had been calculated long before the first shot was fired. Human tactical networks adapted in real time, predicting maneuvers seconds before they occurred. Defensive formations shifted with almost impossible coordination. Enemy weapons disappeared beneath clouds of interception drones. Battles that should have lasted weeks ended in minutes. Finally, the Supreme Commander of the Varkun Dominion opened an emergency channel visible across every battlefield. His proud voice was gone. Only exhaustion remained. "What, are you?" Captain Elena Reyes activated the fleet-wide transmitter. Her face appeared on countless shattered command screens. Behind her burned no flames of triumph. Only stars. "We are the people who hoped this day would never come," she said quietly. We warned no one because we believed the past deserved to stay buried. We built hospitals instead of fortresses. We sent rescue ships instead of invasion fleets. But you mistook mercy for weakness. She paused, her eyes reflecting the blue glow of distant Earth. We did not come here for revenge. Another silence. Steady. Unshaken. We came to end the killing. Across every occupied world, Varkun commanders lowered their weapons. Within hours, surrender signals spread from system to system like the first light of dawn. Humanity had won. Not because it loved war. But because, after surviving the darkest war the galaxy had ever known, it understood better than anyone that the greatest victory was ending one as quickly, and as mercifully, as possible. Several days after the guns fell silent, the Galactic Council convened once more beneath its immense crystalline dome. The chamber looked unchanged, yet nothing about it felt the same. The polished obsidian floor still reflected the countless stars projected across the ceiling. Ancient banners still hung motionless between towering columns of living crystal. Delegates still occupied the same circular arrangement that had symbolized balance for thousands of years. But now every glance carried the weight of recent memory. Every silence was heavier. Every heartbeat seemed louder. Across the chamber sat representatives from civilizations that had once debated trade routes and political influence with detached confidence. Today, they had gathered to witness something far rarer than victory. They had gathered to witness restraint. The massive entrance doors opened slowly. The human delegation entered without military escorts, without ceremonial armor, and without displays of triumph. Captain Elena Reyes walked at the front, wearing the same simple naval uniform she had worn before the war began. Behind her came diplomats, engineers, physicians, rescue coordinators, and relief specialists. There were no medals gleaming across their chests. No victory banners. No captured trophies from the defeated Varkun Dominion. Only exhausted faces. Faces that had spent 72 relentless hours rescuing civilians instead of celebrating conquest. A profound stillness settled over the chamber. Even the oldest delegates found themselves standing, not because protocol demanded it, but because respect did. The council speaker rose slowly from his platform. His voice, once commanding and absolute, now carried an unfamiliar humility. Humanity has prevailed. State your terms. Every translator drone in the chamber activated simultaneously. Entire civilizations leaned forward. Some expected territorial demands. Others anticipated impossible reparations or military occupation. After all, history had taught them that every victorious empire eventually claimed its reward. Captain Reyes looked around the chamber before answering. For a brief moment, her thoughts drifted far from politics. She remembered the burning colonies. The frightened children carried through collapsing shelters. The medics who had refused to leave operating rooms while orbital bombardments shook the ground beneath them. The pilots who never returned. The engineers who rebuilt power stations while battles still raged overhead. Victory had been purchased with lives that would never return. No amount of territory could repay that debt. She stepped forward. We ask for no worlds. The translators echoed her words into hundreds of languages. No tribute. Silence deepened. No vengeance. Several delegates lowered their heads. Instead, she activated a holographic projection above the center of the chamber. Thousands of images appeared. Rescued civilians embracing their families. Alien children receiving medical treatment aboard human ships. Cities rising from ruins through the combined efforts of dozens of species. Former enemies working beside one another to rebuild shattered homes. This, Elena said softly, is our request. She looked directly toward the Varkun representatives, whose proud uniforms had been replaced by simple gray diplomatic robes. Help rebuild everything your war destroyed. No accusation. No hatred. Only responsibility. The word struck harder than any weapon. For several long seconds, no one spoke. Then something extraordinary happened. One by one, delegates from every civilization stood. Not to applaud. To volunteer. Shipyards offered construction fleets. Medical alliances pledged hospital worlds. Scientific coalitions donated terraforming technology. Even former rivals who had spent centuries refusing cooperation quietly committed resources to rebuilding planets they had never visited. The chamber transformed from a hall of politics into the birthplace of something entirely new. Hope. Outside the council station, thousands of vessels departed together, not as rival empires guarding their own interests, but as a single humanitarian armada crossing the stars toward worlds that desperately needed healing. As the human delegation prepared to leave, an elderly archivist approached Captain Reyes. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Your ancestors saved the galaxy once through unimaginable sacrifice." He paused, watching the growing fleet disappear into the sea of stars beyond the station. "And today?" His eyes shimmered with quiet emotion. "You saved it from becoming like those who sought to destroy it." Years later, young cadets across countless civilizations would study the conflict that nearly reshaped history. They would learn about the fleets, the battles, the impossible technology. But every lesson ended with the same sentence. Not as a warning. Not as a threat. As a promise. The greatest strength in the universe is not the power to destroy your enemies, but the wisdom to remain compassionate after you've proven that you can.